Hello and welcome to the JWeb Main Mode VPN Configuration Learning Byte. I'm Gordon Mosley with the Education Services Department at Juniper Networks. Let's get started. After successfully completing this learning byte, you will be able to use the SRX JWeb interface to configure a main mode site-to-site VPN. To demonstrate the configuration of a site-to-site main mode VPN, we have an example here of two organizations. We have the Ultimate Music Corporation, who has just purchased mom and pop music. And of course, you're tasked with establishing connectivity as soon as possible to allow these organizations to share systems and applications and to communicate. And so both devices have SRX firewalls, and the devices have fixed IP addresses. So we'll be able to do a standard site-to-site main mode VPN between these two platforms. Now, this is going to be a route-based VPN. So I'll demonstrate the configuration of a tunnel interface. We'll bind this tunnel interface to a VPN configuration and configure a route that any traffic destined to the remote site would be placed into this IPSec VPN tunnel. So I'm going to connect first to the JWeb interface of the Mom and Pop Music SRX gateway and demonstrate the configuration options. This is the JWeb interface for the Mom and Pop SRX gateway. And when you first log into JWeb, you're placed into configuration mode. Now, there's some dirt work we need to do before we actually go create the VPN configuration. So I'm going to kind of minimize the device settings, and there's under interfaces, there's a couple things we need to do, right? So I'm going to go under ports, and by default, when you select ports, it's kind of a filtered view that you see, and so it shows me all of the gigabit Ethernet interfaces. I want to hit the drop down arrow here, and I want to filter based on a secure tunnel interface. When you're building a route-based VPN, you have to create a secure tunnel interface, and this is what we're going to bind the VPN configuration to, with the idea that any traffic that is forwarded out this interface is the traffic that's going to be placed inside of the VPN tunnel. So let me filter based on the secure tunnel interface, and you'll select the interface. You'll click the arrow by the plus symbol here to add something, and we want to add a new logical interface, right? And so it'll bring up the screen where I can configure the logical unit number. You'll assign this interface to a security zone. Now, this is very important. It's kind of common that people will create a special security zone just for the secure tunnel interfaces. And on Junos platforms, when traffic flows from one zone to another, it allows you some very granular control using security policies to determine what type of traffic is allowed to be placed into or come out of this IPSec tunnel. And then you can define how you can assign an IP address to the tunnel interface. You can enable routing protocols on it, so we can, over this tunnel interface, speak BGP or OSPF or any kind of routing protocol that's supported by the SRX platform. Now, I've already configured a logical unit, a unit 0 for this tunnel interface, and I'm going to hit the edit. Let me select it here, and I'll hit the edit icon to bring up its properties. I made unit 0. That's kind of just a good starting point here. I placed this interface in the untrust zone on this SRX platform. I assigned an IP address to the tunnel interface. I didn't enable any routing protocols or anything, so it's very similar to configuring any kind of physical interface on a Junos platform, but this is just simply a logical interface that we build when we're configuring a route-based VPN. And then we're going to later, when we build our VPN configuration, bind this tunnel interface with the VPN that would route traffic toward the Ultimate Music VPN, the SRX gateway on the other side. All right. So I've made my tunnel interface. The other requirement, since we're in the interface section, is I need to enable the correct I guess I should say protocols on the external interface. So I'm going to go back to my gigabit Ethernet list, and on this particular gate, on both gateways actually, the Gigi 002 physical interface on the device is the device that's connected to the internet, right? Is the device that I'm going to use to establish an IPSec VPN and communicate with the device on the other end of this tunnel. And so one of the things I have to do on this interface is enable IKE, enable the VPN protocols that are used to negotiate the establishment of a tunnel. And so I need to enable those protocols. And I do that by under security services, security policy, objects in the navigation menu. I'm going to go, remember this interface again is placed in the untrust zone. And so I need to go into the properties of that zone. Here's the untrust zone. I select it. I hit the edit icon here to bring up the properties. And then I'm going to go under host inbound traffic. You see Junos devices this is a security appliance, right? And it doesn't accept and process all the protocols by default. And so I'm going to select the GIGI 0. I see all the interfaces that are in the untrust zone. And the interesting one to me is the GIGI 002 interface. And I've made it really kind of wide open here. You wouldn't really do this. I've selected to enable all these protocols. And so normally what you do is you'd say, hey, I want to enable this interface to receive and process IKE traffic so the VPN negotiations can take place and we can establish a tunnel, right? And so that's normally what you would enable. So that's a key thing. You can do all the other config, but if you do not allow that interface to accept IKE traffic and process it, the tunnel will never establish it itself. So please remember to do that piece. And so once I've made the tunnel interface and I've enabled the correct protocol on the physical interface that we're going to use to establish the IKE negotiations, there's one more step that I need to do, and this will be under the network section and under routing. Now what I'll need to do, and I'll have to do this, all these steps I have to do on both sides, right? Both the mom and pop music gateway and the ultimate music gateway. I need to configure a route. And so I'm going to go under network routing and select static routing. And I've already created the route. And I just simply need to say that for traffic destined to and this is the mom and pop network, I'd say, hey, traffic destined to the ultimate music gateway, I want to forward it out that tunnel interface. So let me edit that static route. And so here's the route for traffic destined to the ultimate music network, right? I want the next hop to be that secure tunnel interface, right? And so now when traffic arrives, and I remember on Junos platforms, the whole flow process is session lookup, route lookup, policy lookup. This is what we do when traffic enters a Junos platform to determine what do we do with this traffic. And in this example, any traffic destined to ultimate music's internal network forwarded out this tunnel interface that I'm then going to bind to a VPN configuration. All right, so I've defined my tunnel interface, I've configured the static route, I've configured the external interface on this SRX platform to accept and process IKE traffic so VPN negotiations can occur. Once that's done, I can then come in and begin the VPN configuration. And so under security services, you'll see IPSec VPN. And I'll start with the IKE Phase 1 configuration. And I've already kind of built this. I just want to show you what I have. There's a proposal tab, and you do not have to configure a custom proposal. There are some predefined security proposals that can be used during VPN negotiations that are included as part of the operating system. But you can create your own custom one. As I did here, it's up to you. You'll go to the proposal tab. You'll click the plus icon. You give it a name, something clever like IKE Prop 1. And this is where you specify what type of authentication algorithms would you like to use. I would like this VPN to be these devices to authenticate during the establishment of this VPN using pre-shared keys, or maybe you're authenticating with digital certificates. It's up to you. We're going to keep it simple here and just authenticate using a pre-shared key. What Diffie-Hellman groups would you like to use to generate keying material for the establishment of encryption keys and authentication keys during the negotiations or establishment of this tunnel? What type of encryption algorithms would you like to use? How often would you like to, in seconds, regenerate new keys while this tunnel is being established? So you can define all these custom values if you want to, as I did here. Once you've done your proposal, you'll move to the IKE Policy tab. And I've already created an IPE policy. You're welcome to click on the plus icon, and you will, to create your own. Let me show you what I've done with my IPE policy. Again, you'll give it a name, something that works great for your shop. Now, this is a site-to-site VPN between two devices that have static IP addresses, and so the default establishment mode is main mode, which is, both devices have a static IP address. I have another learning byte where one of the devices has a dynamic IP address. You have to change the IPE negotiations from main to aggressive mode. So this is where you would set that option using JWeb. I'm going to leave it the default. Now, remember, I created my own custom proposal. And so I selected under proposal user defined, and here's my IPE prop 1. But remember, you don't have to do a custom proposal if you don't want. There are a series of predefined ones included with the Junos operating system. And so if these meet your security needs, the big thing, remember, with any of these proposals is both devices have to use the same values. So if I'm encrypting with triple DES and the other device only supports AES, or I only speak MD5 and you only use SHA, then we won't be able to successfully negotiate and establish the tunnel. So the big thing here is the devices on each side need to use the same proposals, okay? And so I'm just gonna, here's my user defined one. That's what I built. And then on the policy options tab, remember, we said in our proposal that we would like to authenticate using a pre-shared key. And this is where you would put in the pre-shared key. Now the pre-shared key really is just Juniper, and that's how you'll type it in. But once you save these settings, it will actually encrypt that string. So if somebody comes in and looks at the VPN configuration, oh, there's the magic word, right? You won't see the actual pre-shared key. So it's secure in that aspect. And so there's my policy. And then now I go to my gateway, right? This is the final piece of my phase 1 configuration. And so I'm going to edit that and show you what my options are. And so you give your gateway a name, right? Whatever you want to call it. And then you specify let me slide this over a little bit. You specify the IPE policy that you want to use, right? So you do the proposal first, and then in the policy, you specify the proposal if you're doing custom proposals. And then in the gateway, you specify the IPE policy. So that's kind of the configuration order that you'll walk through. I specify the external interface. In this case, remember, it was Gigi002. Now remember, we had to go in. This interface, again, is in the untrust zone, so we had to go into the properties of the untrust zone and enable this interface to accept IPE traffic. And again, we have to do that on the devices on both sides of this IPSec connection, right? Now, this is a site-to-site VPN. Remember, main mode, both devices have a fixed IP address. And this is where I would specify you'll type it in here, and you'll click the plus to add it in. This is the IP address of the device on the other side. Now, remember, this is the mom and pop gateway. So the IP address I'm specifying here is the IP address of the ultimate music gateway. And so this is where I would forward the IPE packets to when I'm trying to negotiate and establish this tunnel. There are some IPE gateway options that you may or may not need to configure or enable. There's some dead peer detection. So if you want to, more rapidly determine if the tunnel's up or tunnel's down, if there's a NAT device in between these two devices that are going to be used to establish the VPN, NAT traversal by default is enabled. So there will be an additional UDP header added to the ESP packet so that we can do NAT and PAT without kind of breaking the VPN, right? That's your phase 1 configuration, right? And so we've got our IPE gateway set up, so all of the phase 1 configuration is done. So then now I can move to the IPSec phase 2 configuration. And it's very similar in that there's kind of 3 steps. There's a proposal tab. And again, you don't have to do this part. You can create your own proposal to meet the security needs of your organization. You'll give it a name. And again, you'll specify the hashing algorithms, that you'd like to use, the encryption algorithms that you'd like to use. Now that we have a phase 1 defined and hopefully established, now we enter IPE phase 2 negotiations where we're going to negotiate the encryption and the hashing algorithms we're going to use to actually encrypt and hash the data we want to send over this tunnel. You can specify how often are we going to rekey this. The default is every 3,600 seconds, so every hour we'll regenerate new encryption and authentication keys. The default packet format is ESP, which encrypts and hashes the data. I've never run into anybody using AH, right? But this is where you'd set these options. And again, this is not required, because when you move to your IPSec policy, which is the next step in the configuration, let me edit what I've got here. You'll give it a name. And again, this is where you could specify the custom proposal that you made. In this tunnel, I actually am just taking one of the predefined security proposals that come with the operating system. And if these meet your security needs, you just select them. So again, you do not have to create your own custom proposal. I'm just going to take the standard values from Juniper. We're using perfect forward secrecy, which means we use completely different keying material to generate the encryption and the authentication keys. These keys will not be based on the keying information we use during our phase 1 negotiation. So this is a very common security setting. And what Diffie-Hellman group do you want to use to generate the keying material, right? To generate the security keys for the encryption and the hashing. So you define your IPE policy. And then the final step would be your VPN. Here's a VPN that I've made. Let me edit the properties of it. We can take a look. You'll give it a name, right? Something VPN. Now, this is the phase 2 configuration. The phase 2 configuration is bound to the phase 1 configuration. This is the IKE gateway that we made initially. So I have to do the IKE gateway first and then move to phase 2 so I can tie these two together. I specify the IPSec policy that I wanted this VPN to use. Remember the encryption and hashing and Diffie-Hellman groups, right? And then here's the key. This is a route-based VPN. And so I want to bind this configuration to the secure tunnel interface. This is why you have to do this tunnel interface first, right? And then we put a route that says, hey, any traffic going to Ultimate Music, I want the next hop to the outgoing interface to be this secure tunnel interface. And that's how route-based VPNs work. I always select, and this is actually the default, to establish tunnels immediately. What this means is once we configure this, we're going to commit our changes. And then once those changes are committed, the tunnel's up. And the tunnel will, as long as the devices are up and running, the tunnel will always be established. You can say, hey, you know what? I don't want to establish the tunnel until interstream traffic arrives, right? You can do that as well. But most of the time, I want this tunnel up, whether there's data going across it or not, right? So I just leave it to establish tunnels immediately. You can do some anti-replay options if you'd like. So, it counts packets and analyzes, make sure nobody's doing a replay attack on your IPSec VPN traffic. There's some options here, and some of them may be interesting to you. I'm not sure, but one of them is we can enable VPN monitoring. So it basically sends traffic to a destination across this tunnel. It can notify you in a more rapid fashion whether or not the tunnel is up, is the tunnel down. Some vendors, there's a field here called, in Juniper terms, it's called a proxy ID. Other vendors use the term encryption domains for this feature. And the idea here is that I can use this to specify the interesting traffic that I would like to place into or take out of the tunnel. So I can, the default is any traffic that is forwarded out the tunnel interface would be placed into the tunnel. But if you're working with other vendors, you may need to make these values match something that's set on the device on the other side of this tunnel. There's some fragmenting options that you can configure. But in this case, I'm just going to accept just the standard default values and keep it simple for this learning byte. And so I've done all the parts, right? I've built my tunnel interface. I've allowed the GIGI002 interface to process IKE traffic so the tunnel negotiations can take place. I've built my phase 1 configuration. I've done with my phase 2. And then I would go and commit my configuration changes, right? And then now it's time to think positive. I've done all my configurations. I've committed my changes. What I'm going to do now, and you'd need to go to the Ultimate Music Gateway. Let me do that now, and we'll see his configuration. This is the Ultimate Music Gateway, and I've already done the configuration, adding the tunnel interface. So again, very similar to what you saw on the mom and pop music gateway. Need to change the filter to just show me tunnel interfaces. If I can get the menu to cooperate here. Right, so there's my tunnel interface. I've already configured the logical unit on it, so it's up and ready to go. I've gone in and I've configured the route, and I also have configured the phase 1 configuration, and I've configured phase 2, right? So again, both sides have been set up and configured. So how do I know now whether the tunnel is up and established? Well, I'm going to change from the JWeb configuration mode to monitor mode, which is operational mode if you're a Junos CLI person. And I'll see an IPSec VPN section. So I can navigate down, select phase 1, and I can see, hey, you know what? The phase 1, it looks pretty good here. The IP address of the device on the other side, that mom and pop gateway, the phase 1 is up. It's main mode. Okay, so the phase 1 has been established. I can also click to let me see if the VPN, the phase 2, has been established. So I select phase 2. I'm going to click on the IPSec SA tab. And here is the phase 2 that's been established. So this tunnel is up and functioning, right? So if I'm sending traffic to this, here I'm going to put it in an ESP packet. I'm going to encrypt it with triple DES. I'm going to do hashing using the SHA-1 algorithm. Here's my security parameter index. Here's the lifetime. Here's how much longer this tunnel has in seconds before we actually rekey. Remember, the default is 3,600 seconds. So once this timer reaches close to 0, it'll automatically regenerate new encryption, new hashing keys for security purposes. So that's an example of configuring just a main mode site-to-site VPN between two SRX platforms. So in this Learning Byte, we demonstrated using the SRX JWeb interface to configure a main mode site-to-site VPN. Thank you very much.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Networks Certification Program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.